On today's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast brought to you by Believe, we're putting a bow on the Detroit Pistons 2024-2025 season. But that's not all. We'll also look ahead into the Pistons offseason after an interesting end of season press conference by President of the Basketball Operations, Trajan Langdon. All of that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast brought to you by Believe. Let's do it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
All right, hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Palace of Pistons podcast, our first postseason edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast coming here in May. Who would have thought back in last May that we'd be talking about the Pistons offseason for the first time in May of 2025? Man, I thought we'd be talking about it in maybe even late February with how the Pistons seasons have gone in recent years, but it's just once again a reminder on how crazy this season was for the Detroit Pistons. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to be doing it just here, just me, just myself, Aaron Johnson. It's just me, Oos, for my WWE people out there. We're going to talk about it all, and look, there is a lot to get into. I'd be remiss if we didn't go back and talk about the conclusion of the Pistons-Knicks first-round series. I know in NBA timeline that feels like it was light years ago, but we still have to talk about it. We have to talk about the Game 5 win for Detroit to extend the series, and then the Game 6 defeat in a game where, hey, the Pistons at the end, they had a chance to force overtime. They had a chance to extend the series once again, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Trajan Langdon press conference that had a lot of nuggets inside of it. Before we do that, though, you need to do me a favor, okay? We've got a long offseason ahead of us. That's going to be a lot of Palace of Pistons podcast guiding you through the offseason and guiding you through the dog days of the NBA when we finally get there after the NBA postseason comes to a close. But we want you around for all of these episodes. We want you engaging with us, telling us what you want to see from the Pistons this offseason, because I know that's a huge topic in the local conversation today. And the Pistons community right now is, what are the Pistons going to do with their roster this offseason? But in order to stick with us, you've got to be following us. You've got to be subscribing to us. So whether you're watching us on YouTube, you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go hit that follow button, go hit that subscribe button, like the show, leave a comment, leave a rating. I mean, all that stuff helps us out tremendously as we continue to grow the brand and continue to branch out and do great things. So appreciate you for being here. Appreciate you taking the time to say, hey, this is out of all the Pistons podcasts out there, this is one that deserves my 45 minutes, my hour of time, my hour, 15 minutes of time to listen to, because on a weekly basis, these guys bring it and these guys know what they're talking about. So appreciate you being here. And I don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's get into it. Okay. That series for Detroit, the playoff series, they fall 4-2, forcing a Game 6 after winning Game 5 by 3 points in New York. Look, I think the first thing to start off with here is how Game 6 ended, right? Malik Beasley open on the wing for a three-pointer. Ball gets to Cade Cunningham up top. The Knicks were sending 2-3 guys right his way, potentially to foul because they were up 3. Cade gets the ball out of his hands to an open Malik Beasley, a guy that, you know, had made 6 3-pointers in the game already. Maybe it was 7 actually, but was having a really, really good shooting game after a pretty poor shooting series. But, you know, an open look for him, and Malik Beasley misses the ball. It goes out of bounds, and it allows the Knicks to take that game and wrap up the series. I mean, look, I saw takes all across the board. I was at a somewhat, we'll call it a watch party. There were a lot of takes thrown out there in that moment in time as well. One of them being Cade Cunningham was afraid to shoot the ball. didn't feel that way from watching the game live or watching that final possession back the several times that I did. Obviously looked like the Knicks were going to foul there up 3, or at least Cade Cunningham was going to be smothered by several defenders, several steps away from the 3-point line. So it would have been a heave of a shot. And in that moment, Cade Cunningham decided to turn and pass the ball to a guy that's had an historic shooting season for his career for the Pistons in the league, a guy that has made hundreds and hundreds of 3-point shots this year. And, you know, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, was a top 3-4 player on this team all season long. And he just didn't catch the ball. It's a regrettable mistake. It's a play that the Pistons, that Cade Cunningham, that Malik Beasley, that everyone on their sideline would love to have back. But when I watched that play over, I didn't come away feeling that Cade Cunningham was quote unquote afraid of the moment or anything like that. I think it kind of fell in line with how Cade Cunningham has played the game of basketball since getting to the Detroit Pistons. He has over time built that trust with his teammates. He has been an embodiment of trusting his teammates, even dating back to his rookie season when he kind of had to learn how to do that at times. But I mean, this year, one of the top players in assists per game, was a dominant playmaker for his teammates all season long. And he trusted his guy there. And, you know, the play didn't go the way that the Pistons had wanted it. I just didn't come away with that sense that Cade Cunningham was afraid of the moment or anything like that whatsoever. This is a guy that, you know, in his first playoff series of his career at 23 years old, being defended by several of the premier wing defenders in the NBA, averaged 25 points, just under 9 assists, and over 8 rebounds per game in the series. But it's the unfortunate reality for Detroit is that something that had bit them in the butt all season long, bit them in the butt there as they committed a turnover at the moment of the game where they just certainly could not afford to turn the ball over. I mean, in the series, the Pistons averaged 16.5 turnovers per game. The Knicks only averaged 13. 3.5 possessions in a playoff series that was decided by a total of 8 points. 3.5 possessions per game means all that in the world and more. So, you know, you can look at all the statistics for Detroit, and, you know, you can look at the shooting numbers, right? They shot 32% from the 3-point line. The Knicks shot 36% from the 3-point line. You know, the Pistons averaged fewer steals, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. The biggest thing for me in this series for Detroit was the number of turnovers that they had, and that bothered them in game 1. It bothered them in game 2. It bothered them all the way to the final whistle in game 6. It was just an issue for Detroit that no matter how hard they tried, they just really were never able to fully solve that issue. New York played a really suffocating defense. They put a ton of pressure on Cade Cunningham all series long, and it was just one of those series for Detroit where you know, too many times they got in their own way or sped themselves up or got sped up by New York, and the turnovers, or, you know, really came to hurt them. And we saw that in the final possession. And man, now you look at this and you're saying, well, hey, if the Pistons, you know, if they, by the way, in a game where the Pistons were up late, you know, they could have forced a game 6 and gone back to New York where they had already won twice and had a chance to take the series. And had they, would they have done what New York did in game 1 against Boston and taken game 1? I don't think so personally, but it's those scenarios that you play in your head now looking back at it after several of these things have played out. I mean, you kind of have to talk about the final minutes of that game 6 for Detroit. You know, Ausar Thompson coming out has been talked about a lot in the fourth quarter. Was having a really strong impact on the game and comes out with the Pistons up. The Pistons immediately lose their lead when he goes to the bench, and they were just never really able to regain their footing. Jalen Brunson did what Jalen Brunson had done essentially all series long outside of game 5. He was an absolute star. When Ausar Thompson did come back in on that, you know, that final possession, Jalen Brunson got the best of him. And Jalen Brunson not only got the best of Ausar Thompson, creating that space, making Ausar Thompson touch the floor, but he made the shot. He made the big-time shot on the road to end a series, to end another team season. Jalen Brunson was an absolute star all series long. You can talk about the flopping, you can talk about the antics and whatnot, but at the end of the day, this is a guy that maybe not even touching 6 feet tall. I don't know what they have him listed at, but he's 6 feet tall, 6'1" at the absolute max. And he averaged 31.5 points, 8.2 assists, just 2.7 turnovers per game, and shot 44% from the field, 82% from the three-point line. And even though his three-point percentage was nothing great, he hit the biggest three of the series when it mattered most for New York. So he had an absolute hell of a series. He was the best player in the series. I know that was something that we had talked about as we previewed the series before it began. And I said it, I said, I think Cade Cunningham might be the best player in this series. And, he wasn't. He was good. And we'll talk more about that. But Jalen Brunson was the better player in this series. He was the best player in this series without a shadow of a doubt. And in the final moments when the Knicks relied on him, he ended the Pistons season. So, as much as everyone was attacking him early on in the series, it felt like those types of conversations waned off. And in the final game or two, we really didn't hear as much about the flopping. It really didn't seem to me like it was happening as much. And Jalen Brunson in Game 6 was absolutely incredible. Okay, so let's talk now about just the first playoff series overall for a lot of these guys on Detroit's roster. Looking at, the core guys, I'll leave Isaiah Stewart out of this, even though it was his first playoff series in his career, just because he got injured after playing only 19 minutes in the series. And of course, Jaden Ivey didn't play in the series as well. But for Cade Cunningham, for Ausar Thompson, for Ron Holland, for Jalen Duren, this was their first exposure to the NBA playoffs. And I don't think we should start anywhere but Cade Cunningham. Like I had mentioned earlier, 25 points, just under 9 assists, over 8 rebounds per game. But the efficiency numbers left some stuff to be desired, particularly from the three-point line. Under 18%, 17.9% from the three-point line in the 6 playoff games. Also averaged 5.3 turnovers per game. So there was clearly some adjusting for Cade Cunningham. And look, when you're the vocal point of your team, you're the vocal point of the opposing team's defensive scheme. And the Knicks could not have made that more abundantly clear. They put Cade Cunningham in a position to get the ball out of his hands as much as possible. Cade Cunningham did most of his damage attacking the rim, as whenever the Knicks gave him that opportunity, he just could not hit shots from the outside. And that was a big problem for him. It was a big problem for the team overall. I think about how many more assists Cunningham could have averaged on a per game basis in this series had guys hit shots. But they just didn't, and Cunningham was no different from the outside in this series. The turnovers, another big problem, right? This is something that was an issue for him early in his career. I remember it early last year really being an issue, and even at the beginning of this year, it was an issue. But it's been talked about at several points in Cunningham's career. It's led to the discussions of, hey, is this guy really a point guard? Does this guy need to be an off-ball guard? I just don't come away feeling that way whatsoever. For the position that Cade Cunningham is in, for the sky-high usage that he has, yes, he averaged 5 turnovers per game, but he was playing 41 minutes. He wasn't playing 30, 32, 33 minutes and averaging, 3.5 turnovers per game. He was playing 41 minutes with New York matching his minutes with OG Anunoby. Every minute Cunningham was on the court, OG was on the court as well. So I just feel like, look, he's playing against one of the best defenders in the league, against a defense that is specifically designed to limit him, to force him to get rid of the ball. And there were times where, hey, Cunningham just got beat. He made a wrong decision or whatever. And I'm not going to, act as if the sky is falling, that this was the performance for a 23-year-old with, quite frankly, a much worse roster than the Knicks. in his first playoff series. This isn't me saying Cade Cunningham was spectacular. I don't think that was the case, but anyone that's coming out of this series saying that Cade Cunningham didn't look the part, that Cade Cunningham, is not a guy in this league, I just think you're missing the plot at this point. I think the whole league knows that there's a reason that the Knicks designed their whole game plan to thwart him. And look, he's gonna. If you've watched Cade Cunningham in his NBA career, at what point has he not gotten better at the things he's been questioned for? They've talked about the shooting. He made a huge shooting leap in the regular season this year. They've talked about getting his teammates involved more, taking care of the ball more, was much better this year. Again, in the playoffs, some of those things didn't happen. They didn't work out as perfectly as Cade Cunningham would have liked. But I walk away from the series knowing that it's the first of many playoff appearances for Cade Cunningham, and he's certainly going to be using this as a learning opportunity for him. And in the things that he struggled at in the playoffs will be a focus for him in the offseason that's ahead. I think he's just so mature for his age. He understands what he needs to do, how he needs to perform, and his struggles inside the playoffs will be a key focus for him moving forward. I know there are going to be people in the comments that think I'm way off on that. I think Cade was awful. I think that Cade is, as your favorite horrible local station will say, needs a Batman because he's a Robin or whatever. But that's just what it is. That's how I feel, and I don't think anyone's going to dissuade me at this point. If we go into the next year and it's something similar, maybe we need to have some more discussions. But right now, I just don't feel that way. Okay, let's move on. Jalen Duren, 34 minutes per game in the series, 12 points, 11 rebounds, 65% from the field. He was primarily defending Josh Hart. The Pistons did make some defensive adjustments to try to get him on Karl Anthony Towns a little bit more later in the series when Towns got into the post and left the perimeter. Look, I think there were some very good moments for Jalen Duren. Quite frankly, I think there were some very, very bad moments. It was a very mixed bag, and there were a lot of questions about how Jalen Duren would fare in the playoffs. I think it would have maybe looked a little bit different had the Pistons had Isaiah Stewart in this series. It would have given them some ability to switch up some different matchups and take Duren off the court in some different moments where, quite frankly, they probably would not have had him out there. But when, the difference between Paul Reed and Isaiah Stewart is pretty significant. So it forced Detroit to keep Duren out there more as long as he was staying out of foul trouble. And like I said, a mixed bag for Jalen Duren, who is only 21 years old. So when you talk about the first playoff appearance for all of these guys, I think you have to consider their age. I think you have to consider where they were at last year, what kind of basketball they were playing, 12, 18 months ago. Didn't come out of the series thinking, oh my gosh, Jalen Duren just proved to the world he's up next. You got to get him on his extension right away. I didn't come out of it saying Jalen Duren can't survive in a playoff environment either. So that's where I'm at on Jalen Duren. Look, I think Ausar Thompson's a very polarizing topic in this discussion because there were some absolutely phenomenal defensive moments for him. Obviously, he got things going offensively a little bit later in the series, but early in the series, man, there was just a real issue with figuring out how to make it work offensively with him on the court when he's out there with Jalen Duren and an offense that just isn't overall shooting well from the 3-point line. But the task that he had and the scrutiny that he was under having to defend Jalen Brunson every night, I think it's not a secret and it's not a surprise that the Pistons were just a much better team, not only in the regular season, but in the playoffs when Ausar Thompson was on the court. He is going to have to figure out some things offensively as the series went on, or as the game went on in Game 6. The Knicks kind of closed up some gaps in the paint that made it a little bit more difficult for Ausar Thompson to be open and feast where he was. He's going to have to add some sort of touch in the mid-range. From the outside is the ultimate goal for him, I'd imagine, getting him to develop at least somewhat of a competitive 3-point shot to where defenses just can't sink on him every chance they get. I almost think of Josh Hart in a sense. I mean, Josh Hart was money from the 3-point line in the postseason, but on the regular season, he was just 33%. But hey, if you leave him wide open, he can't hurt you. He did hurt the Pistons. So look, I think Ausar Thompson in his first playoff series, the burden that he had defensively, very encouraging stuff from him. I think he can truly be one of the best defenders in the league. The size that he has, the athleticism that he has, the give a crap level that he plays with. I just know that the competitor in him is going to continue to get better, and he's going to continue to improve his overall game. So really, really liked a lot of what I had seen from him, but the offensive things at some point are going to have to get figured out, because they will forever limit his overall potential and his overall impact on a game if he can't add a little bit more and be a little bit more of a threat on the offensive end, even if it's not scoring, even if it's doing some more of the ball handling and the distributing. Like it's not just, hey, can this guy hit threes? It's can he take some of the ball handling responsibilities from Cade Cunningham? Can they get Cade Cunningham off the ball a little bit, right? Can he do some of the playmaking? Those are all things that I think the Pistons are going to be looking at, considering in his developmental process, and will be something that they continue to try to develop within him as his career goes on. Let's move to Ron Holland, who only played 6 to 7 minutes per game this series. He had one game where it was like, wow, he's getting downhill. He's putting a lot of pressure on the Knicks. And it was really good. I think there were a lot of other moments where he just looked completely overwhelmed by the moment. I think early in the series was a big one. I think later in the series, it was, like I said, NBA time moves on so quickly. Some of these games kind of pass you by. It was either game 5 or game 6 where Holland just looked a little bit lost, and the Pistons had to get him out and get him out quick because he turned the ball over a couple times in a row, and it just wasn't looking good for him. So I don't have too much to say on Ron Holland. I think the bigger thing for him was the regular season and the fact that there was nobody expecting him to come in and contribute the way that he did in year one and contribute as well as he did in his first year with the Pistons. So, for him to play 81 games, for him to impact the game on both sides of the court the way that he did in the regular season, for the lack of time that we saw him in the playoffs, I would just say that I'm impressed with his regular season, and I think he is just kind of in line with the rest of these core guys outside of Cade Cunningham, that they just have to continue to develop. These off seasons are so important for figuring out if they are future guys for this roster, for this program, for this franchise. And I think there are a lot of tools that Ron Holland has. I think the way that he plays, it obviously fits the city. He's become a fan favorite for the way that he competes, and his willingness to get in the middle of things and scrap with guys and not take crap from other teams. I think that's a huge thing to have in this league, and have guys that play that way. And it's a mantra for the Pistons. It's something that they've really embodied. And for the lack of minutes that we saw from Ron Holland in the playoffs, he's just going to have to continue to build off what he did in the regular season and figure out, hey, what do I need to do so that I can play minutes for this team in the playoffs next season? So really, not too much else to say on Ron Holland's postseason debut. Okay, last thing on the playoffs. I know I've rambled on this now for a while, and I want to still get in to the Trajan Langdon press conference. But overall, this playoff series for the Detroit Pistons, did they exceed or did they lack success in the playoffs? Obviously, they lose the series 4-2, but overall, were you impressed by the Pistons in the playoffs? Do you think they exceeded expectations? Because I think they do. I think they did. And I say that after saying that I think the Knicks win the series in 7, But I look at how the series played out. This is the second series all time to feature 4 straight games decided by 3 or fewer points in the playoff series. The Pistons were in every single game up to the wire, except for game 1, when they had that catastrophic collapse in a fourth quarter that they entered leading the game in. They were winning game 1 heading into the fourth quarter, and then just completely fell apart in the final 12 minutes. But such a competitive series that in the end, the margin was 8 points. It just tells me that the Pistons exceeded my expectations, because even if the Knicks had won in 7, I went into the series. I would have never imagined that the Pistons would play every game as close as they did. And the fact of the matter is, hey, you look at game 4 where the refs missed the foul on the final play of the game that would have potentially changed the final outcome had Tim Hardaway Jr. made his free throws and forced overtime. Okay. I look at how game 6 ended. Malik Beasley open for 3 at the end of the game, a high percentage shot for him. They force overtime. Maybe they win that game. So all of these close games for the Pistons, with how many guys that they had entering or playing in their first postseason of their career, for the level of talent and experience compared to what the Knicks had, for the Knicks, like, they had to win this series. If the Knicks had lost in the first round of the Pistons, New York would be wondering, like, who's got to go? Is Tom Thibodeau on the hot seat? Do they have to scrap the Towns and Mikal Bridges alongside Jalen Brunson plan? Like, they would be frantically trying to figure out what major changes would have to come. For the Pistons, they just get to sit back and say, hey, we didn't expect to be here, and our guys played rather well in the playoffs, all things considered. I think this was an absolute win for the Pistons. And I mean, it was. I mean, tell me it wasn't. This was a team that won 14 games last year. A lot of these guys are on their third coach in 3 seasons. A lot of these guys were playing bad basketball a year ago. Think about the player that Jalen Duren is in April of 2025 compared to April of 2024. Think about where Cade Cunningham was at the end of last season compared to where he is now. Cade Cunningham is likely going to make an all-NBA team unless he gets snubbed. The same way the Pistons have lost all the awards they've been finalists for in the league award voting this year, something we'll touch on as well. But I think this was a really good first introduction to the playoffs for this Detroit Pistons core. And I'm overall impressed with how they look despite coming up short in the series. Everything was house money for the Pistons after they made the playoffs. I think you could say it was house money just for the fact that they competed for a playoff spot compared to where they were a season ago. But overall, yeah, pleased with how the Pistons looked in the playoffs, knowing that there's a pathway to continue to get better. That being said, speaking of pathways, let's talk about the Trajan Langdon press conference that took place on Wednesday, where Langdon talked about the pathway for the Detroit Pistons this offseason. Preached patience, but that the team would take calls and still explore opportunities to get better. That's what he said when asked about how the Pistons will manage this offseason, how the Pistons will look at this offseason, how they will operate in the draft, free agency, the trade market. And that is the overarching question with the Pistons this summer. Now that they've made the playoffs, and Trajan Langdon has admitted this himself as of Wednesday, the expectations are different. They're different than what the Pistons had expected them to be. If you had asked them last offseason what they had thought the expectations of this offseason would be, they'd probably sit here and tell you, make the final adjustments, make the final improvements needed to turn this team into a playoff team, a playoff roster. Well, they already are a playoff team. They already are a playoff roster. But now it's, well, how do you get out of the first round? Because a first round exit for Detroit next year, it might be a failure at this point, just with where they were at this year. That's how expectations work in the NBA. Once you do something, the expectation is that you do it better the next time. So the offseason for Detroit, are they going to trade for a star? Are they going to go get Zion Williamson? Who else is out there? Are they going to get Lauri Markkanen? If you're listening to local radio stations, you'll probably hear Zion brought up all offseason long because it's a fancy name to attach to. It's going to help bring in some extra listeners, maybe a couple extra callers, ticket texts, whatever. But I don't think that's how the Pistons are going to operate this summer. And if they are going to go out and get a guy, I don't know if it be Zion Williamson. Spare me that he plays for Langdon's former organization. He played at the same school that Trajan Langdon played at in college at Duke. Spare me that. Because I don't think that's going to be how Trajan Langdon operates. And if the Pistons were going to go after a guy from New Orleans, I'd be figuring out how to get Trey Murphy to Detroit rather than Zion Williamson. Because that's a guy that could really, really change some things for Detroit if they were able to get him. Again, I don't think that's how they're going to operate, nor should they. They have a very young core. They have a group of veterans, some of them that are going to be free agents, that the team would like to retain, and I think they should try to retain. They did not have Jaden Ivey or Isaiah Stewart for this first-round series against the Knicks. Had they had them, and you'll look at the margin of defeat in this series, 8 points, man, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, they could have certainly played a factor in maybe changing the trajectory of this series. So I think those are two big additions to this team for next year. Getting Jaden Ivey back, who 17 points per game, 40% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. Clear growth from him after a season from hell under Monty Williams in his sophomore year. Yes, there are some issues. Turn the ball over too much. You look at his assist to turnover ratio this year, it's a problem. Overall, I think he made improvements defensively. Still has a long ways to go on that end of the floor. But he's a young guy, 22, 23 years old. These guys all have things they have to get better on. And getting a guy that can shoot, that can get to the rim, that has athleticism, that can do some of the ball handling, that can do some of the playmaking, that would have really helped Detroit in this playoff series. And then obviously we know the impact that Isaiah Stewart made on this team all regular season. One of the best defenders statistically in the NBA. So having him in a series where Karl Anthony Towns was a problem and rebounding was an issue, like having Isaiah Stewart would have certainly helped. That being said, I don't think the Pistons do nothing this offseason. I think there are some clear things that they'd like to improve. First off, they're going to have to figure out who stays, because Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Paul Reed and Lindy Waters are all free agents. So that's 5 guys. And I think you'd really like to have Malik Beasley back, and I think he very much wants to be here. I think you'd like to get Dennis Schroeder back, and I think Trajan Langdon said it at the press conference he had post-trade deadline, that Schroeder's a guy that could be here beyond just this season that's now concluded. And then Tim Hardaway Jr. is the guy where, look, you're going to have Jaden Ivey coming back. If you do bring back both Beasley and Schroeder, you still have Ausar Thompson. Ron Holland's going to have an offseason now. It's going to be his second year in the league. There's going to be more reason to play him. I don't know if that same role is there for Tim Hardaway Jr. You look at the money that he was making this past season. What was it? $13, $14, $15 million per year. I just don't think the Pistons are going to be willing to give him that kind of money. And I don't know if that same type of role, Tim Hardaway Jr. was a starter for the Pistons all season long. I don't think that's going to be there waiting for him this next season. So if the Pistons look at it and say, we can only bring back 2 of the 3 of Beasley, Schroeder, and Hardaway Jr., Tim Hardaway Jr. might be the guy that has to go. And I will put it out there that I think if they could get Tim Hardaway Jr. to come back on a much smaller contract, understanding that the role is not going to be the same, I think it would be great, because I think depth is super, super important in the NBA. And I think what he did for this team this year was very, very important. Was a guy that very much helped them when he was hitting shots, was willing to take a charge, was a veteran in the locker room, and was a veteran that could play minutes now. He started every game he played in this year. So it's not to say that the Pistons shouldn't try to get him back, But I think he's just, when you look at the priorities, he's at least 3 out of 5. When you look at those 5 free agents that I named, he's at least third on the totem pole in importance of bringing back. I think Malik Beasley and Dennis Schroeder are of higher importance to bring back. Again, not saying that Hardaway shouldn't be entertained as an option to return, but he might say, I just started all year. I was a starter on a playoff team. I was a contributor on a playoff team. I have another multi-year, $10, $12-ish million a year contract in me. I have to go where I can get that contract. And if Detroit's not going to be that team, Detroit's not going to be that team. So that's where I'm at on those guys. And, going back to really the major story point that we're talking about with Trajan Langdon saying that he's going to preach patience, going to take calls, look at opportunities, but they want to give their guys this opportunity to continue to develop, continue to grow as a team. He talked a lot about the importance of continuity. He relayed it back to his time in San Antonio and how the Spurs were so successful. Bringing back as many of the guys as they can certainly plays a role in having that continuity. And all of those guys, I think, would have value to the team. Even Lindy Waters as a depth piece, I think, would be a fine guy to bring back. He's a guy that at points in times was a rotation player in Golden State, a guy that can shoot the ball, has some size. There's nothing wrong with him. He's an NBA player now. And so, if the Pistons wanted to bring him back, they certainly could. And I think it would be an absolutely fine guy to have on your roster as a 13th, 14th, 15th man. That's a guy that if you're down a couple guys and you need someone to play some rotation minutes, I'm comfortable with Lindy Waters going out there and playing. Heck, I think I even said at one point in the playoff series, you might want to just throw Lindy Waters out there to see if somebody could hit the broadside of the barn from the outside. So, again, that's where I'm at on Detroit's free agents. I think it makes sense for them this summer to preach patience. Now, obviously, if Devin Booker goes out and says, I want to go to Detroit, I want to go play with Cade Cunningham, I've made it pretty clear over the years my affection for the city, for its teams, for the state of Michigan. I want to go back to Detroit. I want to go play in Detroit. That changes things. And I think the Pistons would be absolutely silly to not look at making that a reality if something like that were to happen. Now, we've heard some conflicting reports. Devin Booker's come out and he said that he wants to be a Phoenix Sun for life. Matt Ishbia has come out and said Devin Booker will be a Phoenix Sun for life. He's not on in trade negotiations. Luka Doncic got traded. Anybody in the league can get traded. So it's always a possibility. And it feels like we've heard rumors for years that there's an affinity that Devin Booker could one day end up a Detroit Piston. But again, it has to be something like that. There has to be like a star of the stars in the league that would want to come to Detroit to where it would make sense to trade off, get rid of some of these young core pieces that the Pistons have. I think Detroit's past that level of guys like Brandon Ingram or Julius Randle, like those kind of players. I think the Pistons are beyond that at that point. When we were having those conversations were about getting talent on this team, getting guys that can play the sport of basketball at a functional NBA level on this roster around Cade Cunningham. We are beyond that conversation now. So when you're looking at adding talent, getting better, adding that star piece that if the Pistons don't have it internally are going to have to at some point try to add, it's got to be one of those guys, those real all-star level guys, not a guy that's made an all-star game once or twice and is now on the back end of that portion of his career. No, not anymore for the Pistons. That's not how they need to spend their cap space. That's not how they need to reorganize their team. It just doesn't make sense for them. So that's where I'm at with the Pistons. That's where I'm at with their moves this offseason. Stay stable, stay consistent. I think those are the messages that Trajan Langdon preached, and I think that makes sense. It's something that he talked about last year when he took over. He said, we're going to improve the roster. We're also going to give these guys that have been here a chance to develop, a chance to play, a chance to grow. We're going to put them in an environment to succeed. And the Pistons just won 44 games and played a very competitive first-round series in the playoffs after winning 14 games and going on a 28-game losing streak the season prior. So I think we have to give Trajan Langdon the benefit of the doubt and allow him to execute on his plan after doing so this past year and looking at the success that the Pistons have had. I know there's going to be some varying opinions on that. Maybe you're all in on trading for Zion. Maybe you think the star risk is worth, or the star potential is worth the health risk with him. Let me know what you think in the comments. You can tweet me, comment on YouTube, comment on Spotify, whatever. Let me know. I'll listen to you, but that's how I feel. I'm very much in line with what Trajan Langdon said on Wednesday afternoon. Langdon also talked a little bit about some of the off seasons for certain guys. Two guys that stood out in his conversations, Jaden Ivey and Ausar Thompson, envisions big off seasons for them ahead. It's Ausar's first healthy off season of his NBA career. Obviously, last year was dealing with his health status, with the blood clots, recovering, getting his personal health in check first, and that certainly played a toll on what he was able to do in the offseason. And then Jaden Ivey, who lost half of his third season in the league and lost his first opportunity to play in the playoffs. He was trending in the direction of returning to playing basketball right as the season wrapped up for the Pistons. So you have to feel pretty confident that in the coming weeks, he will have been fully cleared to play basketball and do all the basketball activities that come with off-season training and all of that. So those do certainly have massive off seasons ahead. I think those guys are vital pieces to the Pistons core and to the Pistons future, whether they're a part of it for them or a part of it for them in the trade market if one or both of those guys end up getting dealt one day. But what they provide to this team is super important. And if they can continue to grow in their own games, I certainly agree the off seasons are big for them in proving that, and getting Jaden Ivey back next year is going to be quite a thing to see after the Pistons rattle off the streak that they did, the record that they did after he went down on January 1st. Last thing I'll touch on with the Trajan Langdon press conferences, he did say that at some point he expects there will be some conversations had with Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey about contract extensions. Both those guys are eligible for contract extensions this summer. You know, he didn't say that they'd get signed. He didn't say they wouldn't get signed. He just said conversations are going to be had, which I think is the typical answer you'd get from any general manager, any president of basketball operations. I think it makes sense. You know, I'm going to sit here and say that I don't think the Pistons should be in a rush to extend either of those guys yet. I think it would play in line with their strategy of continuity and letting things play out and giving these guys an opportunity to grow together, to give them another season to see how much success they can build on from this past year. So I don't know if there will be a contract extension done with either of Duren or Ivey. I could also see the front office saying, look at the growth that these guys had. Look at how much better they got this year. They've earned that right to continue to play for the Detroit Pistons and get paid to do so at a competitive level, and they get extended. We'll see on that. I don't know if there should be a rush, but maybe the Pistons feel that way, and maybe the Pistons can get a good deal done this offseason with one of or both of Jalen Duren or Jaden Ivey. Last thing I'll touch on here as we wrap up this solo edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, the NBA end of season awards. The Pistons go 0 for 4 in the awards that they were finalists for. Cade Cunningham lost the Most Improved Player of the Year award to Dyson Daniels. Malik Beasley lost the Sixth Man of the Year award to Peyton Pritchard. JB Bickerstaff lost the Coach of the Year award to Kenny Atkinson. And then Trajan Langdon finished third in the NBA Basketball Executive of the Year award voting. So, look, I thought there was a real case for Cade Cunningham to win Most Improved Player. I get it if you're saying that the award is not designed for players like him. And if that were how the league had voted in all of the years before this one, I would have said, I 100% agree with you. You're 100% right. And Cade Cunningham should not be Most Improved Player of the Year. But go back and look at past winners. Go back and look at Tyrese Maxey's stats from last season to the season prior, when he was already a very good player. I'm just saying, if the league had voted like they did this year, and they had given the award to more of a role player making a leap or a guy that had kind of been in and out of the league making a leap, fine. Totally get it. But that's not how they voted in the history of the award. So I just don't think it's a great response to how the award should have played out this year. Now, if the league changed the criteria and it said there are certain requirements to winning the award, that would be something different. I just think if you look at how the league had voted in the past, Cade Cunningham, deservedly so, was a finalist for the award. The one that really sticks out to me is the coach of the year stuff. The Pistons won 14 games last season. They won 44 this year. They went from the worst team in the league to 6th in the Eastern Conference, a 30-win improvement with a roster that had a lot of the same pieces. The core pieces stayed the same. They added some veterans in Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. and then Dennis Schroeder at the deadline. But, the core pieces of Cunningham, Ivy, Thompson, Duren, Isaiah Stewart, those were all there last year. They were all there this year. They became a very good defensive team. They were one of the best teams in overall net rating in the second half of the season. They got better from game 1 to game 82. I just feel like JB Bickerstaff, if the award was voted on in the way that this year's most improved player of the year was voted on, it would have been JB Bickerstaff that would have won coach of the year. It almost feels like Kenny Atkinson winning. Like Cade Cunningham went from good to great. The Cavs went from good to great. If you get what I'm putting down there, it just feels like the awards got voted on with different criteria in that regard. That was the one for me that I really feel like the Pistons and JB Bickerstaff really, really deserved. I don't think there's a better story in the league right now than the growth that the Pistons had from this past year to this year. And so I feel for JB Bickerstaff and not getting that award as a guy that was ousted from Cleveland after several playoff appearances and comes to Detroit and in year one makes such a massive, massive impact on the players, the organization, the fan base. I mean, the way that the players talked about him, even in the face of defeat at the end of game 6, and they talked about how he inspired them, how he protected them. I really felt like he deserved that award. Peyton Pritchard had a phenomenal season in Boston. I think Malik Beasley cooling off a little bit in the second half. It really solidified that award for Pritchard. I don't, necessarily have super strong feelings either way there. And then executive of the year, I think Trajan Langdon had a really, really good first year in Detroit, and he deserved to be a finalist for that award. He'll have another opportunity this offseason. If he decides to make a swing or continues to build around this team, I think that way that awards voted on, it feels like you don't have to do several major things in 1 year to win the award. It almost feels like it's looked at on like a multi-year arc of what you've done. So he can be in that position to win that award several times over with the trajectory that Detroit is on. Okay, you just got 47 and a half minutes of me talking to myself. I'm out of breath. I'm out of energy. I'm out of things to say. It's the offseason for the Pistons, and there's a long road ahead of us in the coming months. This roster could look very different. You could see a major piece or two added. Maybe the Pistons will do what they say they will do and build on continuity, make some minor upgrades across the roster where possible. No matter what they do, no matter who they draft, if they trade back into the first round, if they trade out of the draft entirely, no matter who they sign, we're going to be here talking about it all offseason long. Look, you've got about a month until I start bringing up Summer League on every podcast. It's May now. Once we get to June, and we're a month away from Summer League in July, I'm going to start talking about it every week. Oh, who are the Pistons going to put on their Summer League roster? Is Ron Holland going to play? Is Marcus Astor going to play? Is Bobby Clinton going to? We're going to talk about it because look, it's the offseason. What else are we going to talk about? So there's going to be so much to cover. I hope you can treat me with some respect and hit that like button, hit that follow button, leave me a comment after I just rambled for almost 40 9 minutes. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you stick around for the entire show and bared with me, salute to you. As always, make sure you subscribe to palaceofpistons.com. That's our website. You're going to get our newsletter sent directly to you for totally free. Link in the show notes description, wherever you're watching or listening from. Greatly appreciate you tuning in to this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.